Aliens Explored is a podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it? You've heard of the Men in Black, but what about their less glamorous counterparts, the drab and dreary men in grey of the British Ministry of Defence, putting in their time on the now defunct UFO desk? Journalist and self-publicist Nick Pope worked on the desk for a few years and even made it the subject of a book. But what does he have to tell us about his experiences? Join us on Aliens Explored as we pick apart the life and work of Nick Pope.
Welcome back, everyone, to Aliens Explored, your weekly podcast where we look at UFOs, UAPs, the people surrounding them, and the historical and recent events that may or may not. I don't know where I'm going with that.
This is episode 78. We still haven't got it right.
But we haven't got a standard introduction. That's the thing.
We haven't. We
don't
don't
have a standard introduction. It gets
we don't
boring.
want to sound too. We don't want to sound too glib, do we?
No, exactly. And we don't script these. We don't prepare them. I mean, I prepare notes. I'm assuming you do, Neil.
I do. I've got a few windows open, with facts at my fingertips.
Oh, not Wikipedia then.
Nope, it's the Daily Mail for me.
Oh my goodness. Yes, not a newspaper. That's my opinion on that. Speaking of which, we're talking today about quite a famous ufologist, a British guy. Like yourself, Nick, because obviously you worked for the MOD.
Yes, I'm your other host, Neil Kelly.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I derailed you.
And I'm one of your hosts, Stu Jackson. Oh my goodness, it's all falling apart.
We shouldn't drink so much when we're doing this.
I'm only on chai tea latte. Yes, let me try that again. But I'm one of your hosts, Stu Jackson.
And I'm your other host, Neil Kelly.
Hello, Neil. Right.
Hello.
Okay. So we're talking about Nick Pope. Yes, you worked for the MOD, did you not?
I did. Yes. I was in the army.
In the army. The British Army, in fact.
British Army, just to be clear.
Well, Nick Pope was a civil servant employed by the MOD. Now, that's different to being in the army, isn't it? I believe.
It's different. I should be careful about what I say about the close links between army intelligence but the MI in MI5 or MI6 stands for military intelligence. So even though probably most of the people working there aren't in the armed forces, a lot of them are seconded from the armed forces or have some kind of military rank.
Right,
and they do work closely. I mean, it's like in America. If you watch a cop show or a thriller, isn't a thriller, and yes, unless there's some kind of demarcation dispute between the various agencies involved in the investigation. So this is a DEA man. No, this is the FBI man. No, this is the sheriff's department. This is, stand aside. Texas Rangers are taking over. Yeah, and that's what the intelligence community is like. There's just all these different agencies all struggling for supremacy. So yes,
right.
So Nick Pope, MOD, but not as far as I can see in any of the secret services.
No, I've only ever heard him described as a civil servant. I've never heard of any rank being ascribed to him or anything like that. Well, there's also an author and journalist, and in fact, I believe he was sort of employed basically as a journalist as part of his MOD
Well, the MOD have a very difficult relationship with the media. Whenever we were given a threat, we get our annual security brief, and they'd list all the threats amongst the Russians and the IRA and Islamic terrorism. But there would always be sort of somewhere around number 2 on the list, investigative journalists who the military and I guess elements of the security service regard as just as much a threat to national security as any Russian spy. That except they're not going to report directly to the Kremlin. They're just going to publish what they found out in open source, and that might be stuff that perhaps the security services didn't really want published. Usually, not because there might be occasions when you're putting lives at risk by revealing secret information, but more often than not, you're just embarrassing someone high up.
There would be that, but I can definitely see where there would be this battle between disclosure and accountability and public interest, and wanting to keep everything kind of hush hush and I get
it. Looks like they got. Yeah, well, it looks like they got to Nick Pope and said, "Well, how about you coming in the tent and piss out?"
Well, I mean, he did work for the MOD for a long time. It started with them in 1985, all the way through to 2006. But the bit that we're particularly interested in was it was only 3 years, 1991 to 94. He worked in Secretariat, Section 2A, or more commonly known, of course, as the UFO desk. Now, like I say, he's also an author, he's a journalist. I believe that was the time when he first sort of looked into UFOs properly. There's, from what I understand, there's no real record of him having an association with UFOs prior to 91. So yes, but yes, he worked on the UFO desk for the Ministry of Defence. This was at the time when they were still investigating them. He has.
Yeah. Open Skies, Closed Minds.
Yes.
Closed Minds. But that's written after the fact. It's an autobiographical account. And the emphasis really is on his 3-year tour of duty at the MOD.
It's allegedly autobiographical. Yeah. Now, before we go any further, it's worth mentioning that Nick Pope, for all our listeners, anyone who's watched any of the kind of the usual suspects in terms of UFO documentaries, your Ancient Aliens or UFOs Declassified, any of the documentaries where they have people coming in as experts talking about these things, you would, if you don't know the name Nick Pope, I am certain you would recognise him. He's a British gentleman, wears glasses, has white hair sort of swept back, and he's quite charismatic. He talks very passionately, very eloquently about historic UFO cases, and is generally perceived to be an expert on them because of his time with the Ministry of Defence, albeit only 3 years, working on this UFO desk. Now I'm going to backtrack slightly. I think that was important to sort of get that so people can picture who it is we're talking about. I'm saying it's allegedly autobiographical because there are a number of ways that Nick Pope describes himself that I would question the accuracy of. I'm choosing my words very carefully. With each other. There are, I believe, inconsistencies. For example, he describes himself as being the front man, as it were, of this UFO desk. He was the public face. He's self-termed himself Britain's Fox Mulder. I mean,
he later said that we're not so much the men in black as the men in grey. Just dull civil servants. We're not.
Well, that is probably closer to the truth than anything. What his duties actually were, it turns out, when you do a bit of digging, his duties in these, and we're only talking 3 years. Let's just keep that in mind. The 3 years when he worked on this UFO desk. Now, this UFO desk is where people would see a UFO, they would contact the MOD and say, I've seen a UFO. His duties were to take down the information and pass them to another organization. But he has self-styled himself as this person who did the investigations. Now, it could be argued that, yes, asking pertinent questions of someone reporting something is investigating. But I think if you say something like, I did the investigations for the MOD, that, I believe, is misrepresentation. That's my belief.
Is it any more than someone bigging up their CV a little bit just to...
That's exactly what it
make
is.
It just to...
Well, no, it's not bigging up a CV a little bit. This is bigging up CV a lot. This is the difference between being the janitor of your local company and claiming to be the MD or the CEO.
Okay.
Because that's what the way Nick Pope presents. He ran this entire desk. He was the front man for it. He was the public face of UFO investigations. He investigated the cases for 3 years. No, he took notes and passed them to someone else. Can even tell you the department that he passed them to was DI-55 Intelligence, or in some cases the Royal Air Force.
Well, he did work in the Air Staff Secretariat. Was what the UFO desk was in the Ministry of Defence. It says where his duties included investigating reports of UFO sightings to see if they had any defence significance. And let's bear in mind that this is the Ministry of Defence, which, like the Department of Defence in America, is really only concerned with UFOs as they might present a potential threat.
I know, right, so I instantly know you have just read that off Wikipedia.
Yeah.
And those are the words that Nick Pope himself gives. Now, with Wikipedia, you're not allowed to write articles about yourself. But here's the thing, Neil. I could write an article about you and you could write one about me.
Yeah.
So...
and you could dictate it to me, and I'd write it.
Exactly. So let's.
But
like
given
I say, it could be argued that asking pertinent questions when a person is reporting a thing could be described as investigating. I'm not saying that it is factually incorrect. I'm saying it is misrepresenting. As an opinion, I'm being so careful here how I say this.
Yeah.
I have strong personal opinions about Nick Pope. They're not particularly good. It's got to be said. I'm also really conflicted because, as I say, he is very charismatic. He's very interesting to watch. He's very passionate when he talks in these documentaries. And if that gets people interested in the UFO phenomenon, that's got to be a good thing. But...
yeah, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? It depends who's getting the interest and what that kind of interest is. If someone is talking about UFOs a lot who is a certifiable nut job, that doesn't really do your credibility or cause any good in terms of credibility.
Absolutely.
Now, so we got to bear in mind that because he was working for the Ministry of Defence, which is like the American Department of Defence, they're only concerned with the potential threat from these UFOs, whether that be a rival power, a potential enemy power that has developed technology way beyond our own. That's to be worried about, or whether these are natural phenomena, but that an enemy has learned how to harness them and weaponize them. That's another phenomenon. Or whether it really is beings from another world who maybe just doing a quick recce before they decide they're gonna come and wipe us all out. So this department, this was set up in 1950. The chief scientific advisor at the MOD became intrigued by newspaper stories. The committee reported in June 1951 that UFO sightings could be explained as misidentifications, hoaxes, or delusions, and recommended that no further resources be expended on this. But the very next year, pilots in the Royal Air Force and other military personnel witnessed UFOs during military exercises, and they set the thing up again. So, as Nick Pope says, he worked at the MOD for 21 years, but yeah, just those 3 years he was undertaking these investigations.
Right. I'm gonna further piss on his parade a little bit here because in those 3 years, and I've really made this point over and over again, it was only 3 years he was doing this. For those 3 years, only 20% of his job was allocated for that.
So it's very peripheral kind of interest in it.
Yeah. And here's a logic statement for you. If the Ministry of Defence are going to be investigating you, for, as you rightly say, they're looking at, is this a threat to us from any direction? Is this ultimately a threat, right? Is the person you want investigating that a civilian?
Probably yes.
Really?
Probably, yeah. Probably.
Identifying whether or not it's a military threat, you want a civilian doing that?
Civilians are the highest levels of scientific expertise, and that's not wearing a uniform.
But Nick Pope's not a scientific. He's not a scientific advisor. He's not a scientific expert that I'm aware of. He's an author and a journalist. All right, let me rephrase it for you then. Would you want a journalist doing that?
Probably not. Probably not. You might want him writing up the report if he's a good writer.
Aha. Well, not even writing up the report, as it seems. It sounds like he was just the person answering the phones and taking down messages. Like a glorified version of that.
And knowing what questions to ask. Basically, who, what, where, when, and why. Which is what journalists ask.
Now, technically, that is investigating. So I'm not, just to be clear, I'm not saying that he is being unfactual. That's not a word, but Actually,
I wouldn't call that investigating. I would just call that stenography. I'd call it, the Downing Street hack pack are often referred to as stenographers for their willingness to just accept government announcements as facts and simply just record them and print them.
I would, and having done this for television licensing here in the UK, I would call it a call centre operative.
Yeah.
That's what I would call it.
He's been demoted again.
Well,
from investigative journalist to stenographer to call centre operator. Maybe that's what he was. Yeah.
That's what the job description sounds like to me. Now, what I don't understand, and this is so a lot of this information has come out thanks to a should we say a rival in some ways of Nick Pope's, one Dr. David Clarke, who is a ufologist in his own right and has worked tremendously hard in getting the MOD to release or to make public a lot of UFO information. It is an archivist of sorts. So yeah, he's made a lot of done a lot of research on Nick Pope. They don't like each other. It's fair to say. And I think, if Nick Pope ever listens to this, tweet us, Nick.
He may well,
put your
Nick
side
Pope,
of things.
Let's advertise
we
as
want
well.
to hear. But yeah, I mean, Nick is very scathing of David Clarke and Dr. David Clarke, and refers to him as a hobbyist, whereas he was a professional. I mean,
Well, because he got
Dr.
paid
David
for it.
Clarke was a professional archivist. Anyway, that's we're hobbyists, and we happily admit we're hobbyists.
Yeah,
we're not professionals. So yeah, come at us with your worst, Nick Pope. I mean, I also have to say, full disclosure, I do not like the man on a very, very deep personal level. His politics, I follow him on Twitter, and I often question a lot of the bullshit that he puts out on there. He's anti-vax, anti-mask. He's got holds a lot of right wing.
He's bought into the whole package.
Yeah, I mean, it's everybody's right to have whatever political views they want, but
well, bear in mind, many of our listeners would probably describe themselves as conspiracy theorists, and a lot of conspiracy theorists, that has led to the anti-mask, anti-vax, climate change denial. The election was stolen from Donald Trump. It all fits together in a neat package. Certainly more so in the United States than here, I think.
Yes, which is where he's now based, Mr. Pope. Yes. So, gosh, I've talked a lot about my opinion. What was your opinion before going to this episode, Neil?
I was less interested in the man himself than in about the MOD's work on UFOs, which once again they've canned. So if you see a UFO, Nick Pope doesn't work. If you try and phone the MOD to say I've seen an unidentified object moving at phenomenal speeds across the sky and back and forth, and I'm quite frightened, they're just going to say, sorry, Nick Pope doesn't work here anymore.
No. Well, he hasn't worked there since 1994, and then he only worked there for 3 years. Well, worked there for 20% of 3 years.
Yeah, so now he's a freelance journalist and media commentator. So yes. Did he become that after being a civil servant? They didn't. It's not that they found a journalist and employed him in the MOD. That
I believe that.
He worked, he worked as a civil servant.
Journalist first.
Was he?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, he was employed as a journalist.
It looks to me from what seems to be his own account on Wikipedia that he was as you say, a call centre operator, taking down these details for part of the time which he worked at the MOD, because that is a long time to work for the Ministry of Defence if you're a journalist by training. And now he works as a freelance journalist and media commentated, covering subjects that include the unexplained, conspiracy theories, space, science fiction, and fringe science. Well, that sounds like a neat, fairly, actually a narrow range of subjects, really, doesn't it? He's not covering sport or politics or culture or music.
Well, I mean, essentially, he's paid to speak at events and go on these documentaries. And here's the thing, I could forgive a lot. The politics to one side, that's just a very personal, and I feel. I have a personal dislike of the man. I just think it was important to make our listeners clear on that. So, I am biased, and I know I'm biased, and now everyone knows I'm biased. That's fine. Make up your own minds based on that. But, I can forgive all the, sort of the history and the, bigging it up and misrepresenting it, if when he's on these documentary shows, he brought stuff to the table. Like I say, he talks very passionately, very eloquently, but he brings nothing to it. He doesn't add anything to the discussion. He doesn't give any theories. He just cites what happened. Here's what happened. Here's what we don't know. Well, yeah, we already know what we don't know. What we want is theories. What we want is, where do we go from here? And he doesn't add anything to the discussion.
I guess that's his journalist hat on, isn't it? He's just there to. I'm here to take notes and write it up. I'm here to report what other people say, not what.
Which is fine, but the documentary's already doing that. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah. He's an entertaining figure to watch. Like I say, he does talk very passionately. And I suppose, I'm saying he brings nothing to the table. If he brings interest from the public into UFOs, that is something to be appreciated and lauded.
That's a hard one to pull off, actually, to be passionate about something without actually telling people anything, without offering any kind of view of your own, any perspective of your own, but you can still be entertaining about it.
It is, but yeah. Oh, yeah, it's a skill, and he is skilled at what he does. I won't, credit where it's due and all that. Yeah.
But he's not going to stick his neck out like David Icke.
Probably not. I can't see it. There is a theory. So Nick Pope wrote about an alleged UFO encounter, a close encounter, in fact, of the third kind.
Right.
A direct interaction with an extraterrestrial being. And it has been theorized that, in fact, it was his own encounter, but he's changed the name because he doesn't want to be seen as a nutcase. So there you go. That's something to consider. He might be telling the truth. It might have been about somebody else. But it's an interesting theory.
Well, I suppose that is the danger, isn't it? If you have a close encounter of the third, fourth, which is the one we have sex with, is that the seventh kind?
I can't remember.
And you tell people about it, there is a danger that you'll be described as a nutcase, either because people just say that because you haven't told the story very well or very convincingly, or maybe the deep state who really run things want to shut you up, just like they've killed all those vaccinated people because all those unvaccinated people to because they know too much. Apparently, the deep state does that.
Well, yeah, I could understand someone wanting to, keep things quiet. I think it's very different now. If someone came forward and, I've seen a UFO, I think generally speaking, most of the public would be far more forgiving of a story like that than they would have been. Neil, we're of a similar age to Nick, but Nick Pope is, at the time of recording, 55. So he's just between our ages, Neil. So we're all of a generation where we can remember back where someone said they saw a UFO, they were ridiculed. They were ridiculed mercilessly. If they came out in public and it was in the media, it was devastating to a person. Now, I think that's deliberate. But Nick Pope would be of that generation where he remembers that. And I can understand someone having trepidation about coming forward of our generation in particular. Even modern generations, it wouldn't be very very good, I'm sure. But anyway, let's summarise what we think about Nick. But I think I've been fairly clear in my opinions throughout this. What do you think, Neil?
I think I agree with you that Nick Pope had a peripheral relationship with he worked for a little while part-time for a part of the MOD, which has long since been shut down, as he says.
They claim.
The X-Files have been closed down. They claim, where basically people would call in if they saw something in the sky that they thought was strange, and it might get investigated or it might not, depending on whether there was a perceived level of threat, because we, after all, talking about the Ministry of Defence Air Secretariat. They're concerned with fighting wars in the sky.
That's it. But like I say, it's, if he's bringing interest into the subject, that's a good thing. To me personally, he doesn't have the credibility that we need in the subject. Honesty is always the best policy. That's why I say, we're hobbyists, Neil. And, we would never claim to be anything but hobbyists. Same with even when I talk about crop circles, I've been studying them for 20 years. More than 20, 22 years now. We're in 2022. I've bbn studying them a long time, but I would never describe myself as anything but an amateur. I don't believe in misrepresentation. I think it devalues everything that is said, whether it's accurate or not. It's not a good thing. But what do you think, listeners? Have we got it completely wrong about Nick Pope? Is he far more genuine and credible than what we're saying here? Is it a question of other people trying to discredit him? Or have we hit the nail on the head and he should be putting the record straight on a few things? Do let us know what you think. And if you are listening, Nick, do genuinely get in touch. We'd love to have a debate with you about this and hear your side of the story.
We'll keep Stu on a short leash.
Yes. You can go straight to the front of the queue if you do get in touch. And you, like our regular listeners and our new listeners, you can contact us via the usual means of email at aliensexplored@gmail.com or on Facebook and Twitter at Aliens Explored. You can also find all our previous episodes at aliensexplored.com. And while we're on, listeners, do leave us a cheeky review. Nick Pope, don't bother leaving us a review. We know what you think, no doubt. But everyone else, do leave us a review if your podcasting methods allow it, or a star rating, or whatever you have at your disposal. It really does help small little podcasts like ours, because it's just me and Neil. We're sat in our little studies at home, recording this over Zoom. We edit it ourselves. We do it all ourselves. It's and we love doing it. We do love doing it. We want to continue.
How
doing
very
it.
modest of you! It's Stu does it all. I just turn up with a.
You turn up with an opinion.
My 2 cents worth. Yeah.
Indeed. So if you can leave us a cheeky review, that would be very much appreciated. Or you can just tell us what you think via email.
We'd love to hear from you, and we will mention it on our show, good or bad.
We do indeed. So do join us next time when we'll be going back to 1966. Over in America, where there was a UFO encounter near Shepherd Air Force Base. Don't want to miss that one. In the meantime, keep watching these media commentators and their employment histories and the skies. Take care for now.
Catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Aliens Explored is a Figo Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter and Facebook by searching Aliens Explored or visit aliensexplored.com.